Yeah, I've got it.
Yeah, people do it online, they don't have to come here.
Yeah. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome everyone here and any visitors, maybe not. But yeah, thanks everyone for coming out. Midweek class, where Dan Jolly will be talking on Revelation 13, which I'll just leave it for the moment. I'll say that bit before he comes up, so open and saying it twice. We're going to open with hymn 303, which will be followed by prayer. Come before you now, Father, as we take a moment in the middle of this week to join together and to come around your word. And we know, Father, the world is in turmoil right now around this globe, but we can come in peace and without worry because we know that you are in control. And we thank you, Father, for the time that we have now to open up your words and to read the signs and the visions that are written in the book of Revelation. So help us to hear your words and your prophecies, both those which have come to pass, proving your word true, and those in the future that we can look forward to as well, so that we can be ready and prepared for your Son's return. And it is for that time when we'll see that Lamb on Mount Zion. We know this time is soon, Father, so help us to be watching and standing and ready to welcome him. And it is through him that we come to you now, the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Brother Dan's talk is based on Revelation chapter 13, and I will now read Revelation chapter 13 for you. Okay, Revelation chapter 13. And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. And I saw one of his heads, as it were, wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast, and they worshipped the dragon which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth, speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them that which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound by a sword and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. With that reading from Revelation 13, we'll now ask Dan to lead us to the title, A Beastly Beast, a Dragony Dragon, a Lammy Beast, and a Copy.
Thanks for that, Nathan, and thank you very much, I think, Lisa, for selecting our hymns for tonight. My apologies, everyone. I'm on a very short schedule at the moment, and so my prep time was much less than I wanted for tonight's class. Started this on Monday evening. So thank you, Lisa, for helping. I think it was Lisa. Thank you for helping there. Perfect hymn, by the way. Okay. So, a beastly beast, a dragony dragon, a lammy beast, and a copy. Hopefully, having read the chapter, you kind of can all get where I'm coming from with that title. Thanks for that, Brother Nate. Yep, indeed. So, normal sort of flow of the class. We're going to do a quick recap, Revelation 13, and then if we want to, we can talk about the next class. So, you remember, 2, maybe 3 months ago now, we did Revelation chapter 12. And that was a chapter that fundamentally described the rise of Constantine and the establishment of a Christian Rome. We saw the woman, and we knew something was wrong with her because she looked like the ecclesia, but she was pregnant. And the bride of Christ is not yet married. She's betrothed, but she's not married. So what's the ecclesia doing pregnant? And 9 months of days of years later, 270 years later, after the beginning of the ecclesia, she gave birth to Constantine. And there was this dragon, wasn't there? A great big red dragon in heaven, drew the third part of the stars, some very powerful powers got chucked down to the earth by this enormous dragon in the heavens, representing the pagan forces arrayed against, if you like, infant Christianity as it became more powerful and political in the empire. And we saw how Constantine waged war with Licinius and the pagan half of the Roman Empire and was victorious. Remember, he claimed to have seen the sign of the Christ, the Christos, in the heavens. He got all his soldiers to paint the Christ symbol on their shields, and they went to battle, the Battle of Milvian Bridge. And next thing you know, the Roman Empire is swiftly becoming Christianized. But more importantly, there is a Constantinian shift in the Christianity that was believed and followed. And Christianity went from being a persecuted church to a persecuting church. That's really important. And so it's no surprise that even though Constantine wins, the dragon somehow lives on, because, well, now Constantine himself is becoming increasingly dragon-like in his proclivities and the way he guides the church, and the church is becoming dragon-like in its own way. And so what was left of true Christianity, and indeed Christianity that was not true Christianity but had not become orthodox, fled to the wings of the earth, the edges of the earth. And we saw that in all likelihood our two witnesses from chapter 11 were the woman and the earth representing political forces arrayed against growing Orthodox Catholicism and the political system that it was aligned with, and the woman representing the ecclesiastical or religious systems like Protestantism, but also, we believe, like ourselves. So, any questions from that? That's last class, some time ago now. All right, so this is a chapter with 4 beasts, no, 3 beasts in fact. There's our leopard-like beast, which was on our screen to start with. And actually, the picture we had on the screen was a pretty good representation, believe it or not. Leopard-like body, mouth like lion, feet like bear. Very, very good representation. So the leopard-like beast in verse 1. There's the dragon, which we're going to come across in verse 3, but the dragon's not really in the chapter. The dragon influences the chapter, but he's kind of not really there. We'll see that in by and by. And then we've got the lammy beast, which we'll come across in verse 11. And finally, the image of the beast, which we've called the copy. So a number of beasts. And what we're seeing in this chapter is the continuation of what we began in our last chapter. The Lord Jesus Christ is painting for the saints the development of Orthodox Catholicism, which would oppress the saints until Christ came. And that's what he's describing. How did Catholicism get to where they were? That's very small and also ever so slightly blurry. So we can unblur that a little. It could, of course, just be my eyeballs. I think that's slightly better. Don't get too worried about this. We are looking at a broad span of history. So we're going to go from roughly 476, which, if we go back to Revelation chapter 8, was the point in time where the Roman Empire in the West ceased to exist. Odessa and the Heruli, Theodoric and the Ostrogoths came across, and all of a sudden the lights went out for the Western Roman Empire about the 450s. The lights went off and there was no more Western Roman Empire. And we're going to see those lights start to come back on in about 476. And we're going to trace through the history of what happened when a new empire grew in the West. We're going to follow it all of the way through this chapter, because that's what this chapter is describing for us. It's describing what happened in the West with the growth of a new empire. and we are heading towards the Holy Roman Empire. That's what we're going to be looking at. But just to touch on that dragon, we've talked about the dragon. You'll see the dragon, he's mentioned a lot of times in this chapter. But he's kind of almost in the background, which is why I've said he's kind of not in the chapter. Verse 2, halfway through the verse, the dragon gave him his power. So the power of the first beast comes from the dragon. That is the Eastern Roman Empire, what's left of it, which was soon going to be called the Byzantine Empire. Verse 4, all the people worship the dragon, which gave power to the beast. He's there in the background. Verse 5, power was given unto him. That is, power was given to the beast by the dragon. And way down in verse 11, we discover that the lammy beast is going to speak like the dragon. So there's all of this reference back to the dragon. And we need to remember what the dragon is. The dragon is our Eastern Roman Empire. Now, I'm really tired tonight. It's entirely possible I'll start speaking gibberish at some point in the evening. I trust those of you who dislike gibberish in your Bible classes to call it out when you hear it and let me know that something I said made no sense. So, where we're headed to at the end of our chapter is going to be the point where no man can buy or sell except they've got the mark of the beast. And the unusual thing is that's really where we start, because the dragon was already doing that. So this is a quote from the Venerable Bede, now known as Saint Bede, to those of you who like to keep up with your saints. He died, thankfully, in 735, wrote a bit of poetry. This up on the screen is a hymn. Many of you have probably memorized this, maybe sang it to your children. He is quoting from Justin Martyr, who was alive about 150 years after Christ. And Justin Martyr, quoted by the Venerable Bede, is effectively saying this. He said, speaking of Christians living in the dragon system, the pagan system way back in the 100 ADs, he said, the Christians had not the power of buying or selling anything, nor were they allowed the liberty of drawing water itself before they had offered incense to the detestable idols. So there were times in the tribulations that came upon the early church, way back when there's only a dragon system, where they couldn't buy or sell. And as we've just looked at, we've seen the dragon keeps on popping up again and again and again in this chapter, because what we're being told is that when we get to the end of the chapter and they can't buy or sell except they've got the mark of the beast, nothing's changed. All that's happened is a great big red dragon that once fought Christianity has now morphed into a dragon like a leopard, has now morphed into a dragon like a lamb, which now has a copy of another beast. They're all the same. They behave the same, they think the same, they talk the same, they do the same to the saints. Nothing will change. But the beast and the way it looks has morphed. Does that sort of make sense? Nobody nodding, so I'll just assume that I'm going to have to slow right down, really slow. So, fine. Everyone familiar with the idea? No. Okay. So, just a picture. I like pictures. They help me a lot. This is where we're going to end up. This is what looks suspiciously like a Roman coin. It is not, in fact, a Roman coin. That, for those of you who are up on your Latin, on the side of it says Carolus Imperius Augustus. This is the Roman denarius of Charlemagne, the first emperor of the new Holy Roman Emperor. Imperator Augustus is what it says. In other words, he is the Imperial Augustus, Charlemagne the Imperial Augustus. And he looks like a Caesar, doesn't he? Despite the fact he was Germanic, French, something, Frankish, whatever that means, descendant of some sort of sausage, I have no idea. But he looks very much like a Roman Empire. And that's because nothing's going to change. Now, we had this slide last time. Why is chapter 13 after chapter 12? And I just want to remind us, this is the proof that there's a flow of thought here. Way back in chapter 11, when we were talking about the 2 witnesses and the 42 months and all of that sort of stuff, in verse 7, when the witnesses have finished their testimony, the beast that ascends out of the abyss, in other words, out of the sea, the beast that ascends out of the sea will make war with the witnesses. We come to chapter 13, verse 1, and I, John, stood upon the verge of the seashore, and I saw a beast coming up out of the sea or the abyss. We're just continuing on the story. And it says, this beast has 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, we know this. 7 heads and 10 horns. Revelation 17 fills in the detail for us. We'll be there later on tonight. Here is the mind that have wisdom. The saints will understand this. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which this woman sits. There are your 7 heads, 7 mountains, the 7 hills upon Rome herself sits. So what we're being told is that this beast here in Revelation chapter 13 has a connection with Rome. Now just hold this idea of heads and hills in your mind. We're not done with this thought yet. There's more to it. But 7 heads, Revelation 17 tells us there's 7 hills. And it speaks of something centered in Rome. So we're being told this beast centered in Rome. And it's got 10 horns. 10 horns. And again, Revelation 17, the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings. Revelation 17 is explaining Revelation 13 for us, which have, at the time at which John was speaking, received no kingdom, but received power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and they give their power and strength to the beast. But I want you to have a look at verse 1, and then put your hand in your Bible and flick back 1 chapter to chapter 12, verse 3, because this is what we were looking at last class. What's the difference? I mean, obviously one's a beast and one's a dragon, but both of them have got 7 heads. Both of them have got 10 horns. What's the difference? Anyone? They've both got crowns. Yep. Both of them have crowns. Horns. It's to do with the horns. Both of them have horns. It's to do with the horns and the crowns. We're getting there. What's the difference? Think of the horns and the crowns. Aha. Absolutely right. So in chapter 12, the crowns are on the heads, the hills, in other words, the city. The crowns, the power is centered in the city, in the system, in the Roman structure. But when we come to chapter 13, the crowns, the power is centered upon the horns, the kings. What we're getting here is a different system. It looks the same as the dragon in many ways. Got the same number of heads, same number of horns, got crowns as well. Does very similar stuff, but the power is shifted. In Revelation 12 with the dragon, the power was centered in Rome, the 7 hills. But in Revelation 13 verse 1, the power is now upon 10 kings. Now, what we're being told here is we've moved on in time. We've moved on to a point in time where there are 10 kings. Brother Thomas came up with this. He said, here are the 10 kings. They're the Huns, the Vandals, the Visigoths, Burgundians, Gepidae, Lombards, Franks, Suevi, Alans, and Bavarians. No idea why he picked those 10. Because there were lots of other options as well, and he could have picked other ones. but he picked those ones. For starters, where are the Ostrogoths? Why did they get missed out? There's lots and lots of others he could have picked on, but he didn't pick them. Why that? Well, in the Bible, 10 is a representative number. It's a number that just says all of them, the whole lot, a handful, all of them. Could be 9, could be 13, could be 7 one year and 15 the next. It kind of doesn't matter. I think this is trying to tell us is the power is centered on all the kings. All the kings who have divided up the territory that used to be ruled by the 7 hills. In other words, all the territory that Rome used to rule. The Western Roman Empire. Now the power rests upon all of these little kings, all of these kingdoms and fiefdoms. And yes, some of these will be among them. The Burgundians had their kingdom, and the Lombards had their bit, and the Franks had their bit. All of them had power in the beast system described in 13 verse 1. But we're told that upon his heads is or it should be, a name of blasphemy. A name of blasphemy. A name of blasphemy. Now, it is a name of blasphemy because if you come across just briefly to chapter 17, we know this chapter really well, and this is the mother of harlots chapter, you can see that the beast in verse 3 of chapter 17, it's kind of like it's collected everything from the previous beasts. Our beast for tonight has got a name of blasphemy, but here, he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast full of names of blasphemy. This system at the end of time has got all of the names of blasphemy. And you see, what's blasphemy? Well, Revelation tells us what that is as well. Come back to chapter 2. Because in Revelation chapter 2, John's going to tell us, or Christ is going to tell us more to the point, what blasphemy is as far as he's concerned. Verse 9 of chapter 2, speaking to Smyrna, he says, look, I know your works, Smyrna. I know your tribulation and your poverty. You are rich. You're doing wonderful, Smyrna. But I also know the blasphemy of them that say they are Jews and are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. Blasphemy is saying one thing and being something completely different. Saying one thing, but being something completely different. So, what's an example of that? Well, back in our chapter 13 and verse 6. Here's how this beast operates blasphemy. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God to blaspheme God's name. In other words, he said, my name, I'm God. He said he was something that he was not, to blaspheme his tabernacle. This building, St. Peter's, is the holy temple of God on earth, where God meets with man. He's telling a lie. It's something that's not true. He's saying he is something that he is not. This church is the temple, the family of God, says the Pope. But it's not. You see, that's what blasphemy is. Saying one thing that isn't true. And blaspheming against them that dwell in heaven. Now, those that dwell in heaven, that's the saints. And he's stolen those. He said, no, we got all the saints. Look at them. They're all around our building. That one and that one, Bede the Venerable, and Joe, the patron saint of thieves. And these are all the saints. And the names of those who should be in heaven, the saints, no, they've stolen them and said, no, we are the saints. Blasphemy is saying something you are not. And that's how he blasphemes against God and against the believers. So what we're being told is that we've got a system that used to have power vested in the 7 hills, but now has power vested in 10 kings or so, but it's going to speak terrible things, lying things about God and the saints. All right. Most of you will know, but some of you will not, that all of this chapter in particular is taken by the Lord from another passage, and we have to go there. So, but just before we do, one other thing. A name of blasphemy. A few chapters ago, we talked about the French Revolution, and we said so many names perished in the French Revolution. And we said that, well, that spoke of families, it spoke of people, it's kind of a placeholder for a person. We talk about making a name for oneself. That's what this means here. He's got a name for blasphemy. He's famous for his blasphemy. He is the blasphemer guy. You know, when you want to blaspheme, dial the blasphemer guy. Here he is. And it's kind of saying that he's got a reputation for this. All right, as we said, Daniel chapter 7. Let's go to Daniel chapter 7, because Daniel chapter 7, Daniel has this vision of 4 beasts. Where did they come out of? The 4 beasts of Daniel 7. Anyone? Other than Megan? The sea, absolutely. So Daniel standing upon the seashore, he sees some beasts staggering up out of the sea. And of course, what he sees, as you can see up there on the screen, it's basically all being compressed into our vision for tonight. He sees staggering up out of the sea a beast that is leopard-like, but it's got bare feet, it's got a lion mouth, and well, it's not the dragon, but the dragon's hanging around, and he's going to give him his power. So this is a very, very similar story. And in verse 7 of Daniel 7, we're told that Daniel saw in the night visions the 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, strong exceedingly. It's got iron teeth, it devours and breaks in pieces and stamps the residue with the feet. It's diverse from all the rest, and it had 10 horns. And Daniel looks at the horns, and behold, there came up before them a little horn, before whom 3 of the first were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn are eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. And if we read through the story, what we'll discover is that this particular horn, which is part of this beast, is going to, well, it doesn't actually say the word blaspheme, but it does say very, very similar things. Verse 24. The 10 horns out of the kingdom are 10 kings. Exactly what Revelation said. That shall arise. Another shall rise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings, and he shall speak great words against or attacking the Most High and wear out the saints. This is the same story. And what we're looking at in Revelation chapter 13 is the Lord doing us an enormous favor, because Daniel here has got well over 2,000 years of history crunched into one beast, the dragon, the unnamed beast here in Daniel 7. And the Lord Jesus Christ is going to say, all right, let's just tease out the pieces. We'll stretch it out a bit and see how it developed and what the flow was. But fundamentally, we're going to be following the story of Daniel 7. There is going to be a point at which 3 horns, we could say, were torn up. It's not described in Revelation 13, but it'll happen. And there's certainly going to be one with a mouth speaking great things of blasphemy against the Most High. It's the same story. All right, back to Revelation 13. We've got to keep moving and not enjoy my sidetracks too much. I'm sure you're not enjoying them, but I do. Revelation 13 again. So we said 7 heads. Hold that thought, because in verse 2, the beast I saw was like a leopard. Okay, we've seen that. It's got the feet of a bear. It's got the mouth of a lion. It's got all of these characteristics that come from the various systems that have gone before in Daniel 7. The dragon gave him his power, his seat, and great authority. We'll look at that in just a minute, how the dragon did that. But, says John, I saw one of his heads, as it were, wounded to death. His deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered at the beast. So what's going on there? Well, Brother Thomas says that the 7 heads refer to 7 forms of government. regal, consular, dictatorial, decemviral, tribunitial, imperial, and Gothic. Now, he gets this from Livy and Tacitus. I've gone looking in Livy and Tacitus to try and find them. There's bits of it. I can't find a neat package like Brother Thomas has, but nonetheless, it works. So unless anyone's got anything better, in which case come and tell me over supper or shout out now, we'll roll with this as the seven heads in another sense. So this is another way that the seven heads are being represented according to Brother Thomas, and he does use both. Now, we read here that one of his heads was wounded, and I've got the imperial head circled. And you think, well, what's the justification? How does this work? And is there any basis for this? We'll come across to Revelation chapter 17. We've been here twice already. We've not turned it up. Oh, well, actually, 3 times. We've only turned it up once. Verse 9. Here is the mind that has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains upon which the woman sits. So there's our justification for saying it's Rome, a 7-hilled city. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come, and when he comes, he must continue a short space. And Brother Thomas says what this is talking about is it's talking about a perspective of those heads from John's vantage point. And he says, from where John was, the regal system within Rome, long gone. That sort of popped up soon after Romulus and Remus and then disappeared. By about 300 BC, the regal system was long gone. They moved into the consular and then into the dictatorial and then into the decemviral and so on, so on, so on. But by the time we come to John, we're in the imperial system. Emperors rule in all Roman kingdoms. 5 are fallen. The 6th is there. And then John says, the other has not yet come. The 7th hasn't happened yet. He says, well, the 7th, that's the Gothics. The Goths are going to rule in the 7-hilled city for a period. Odessa will rule as emperor for a short time, and there'll be Gothic rule. Verse 11, and the beast that was not and is, was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7 and goeth unto perdition. And so what Brother Thomas says is what's going to happen is there'll be an 8th head, which will be of the previous set of heads. In fact, it'll be a repetition of the 6th. That's Brother Thomas's explanation of Revelation 17. But if we now go back to Revelation 13 and have a look at verse 3, and we sort of overlay that thinking over the top, I saw one of his heads is wounded to death. Which one's that? Well, that's the imperial one. The emperors have been cut off. Odessa has come through and killed off the last of the Roman emperors, and now there are no more Roman emperors. There's only Gothic kings. And so the imperial system of Rome has been wounded unto death. All the world wonders at the beast. And then all of a sudden it's healed. There's emperors back on the throne. Well, how did that happen? How did the emperors end up back on the throne of the Western Roman Empire? Well, among other people, there was a guy called Justinian. He was a very, very ambitious Eastern Roman emperor, and he decided, no, this is just not good enough. We're going to have Rome back. Can't have it in the hands of Goths. They smell bad. They ruin the place. The vibe is all wrong. We're going to get it back. So he sent his best general, I think his name was Belisarius, marching across the Roman Empire, slaying and killing and invading Rome. And in fact, he invaded and captured Rome about 3 or 4 times. And he captured Ravenna and a whole bunch of other important cities. And he set up puppet emperors who would then do service to the emperor in the east, Justinian. And so, yes, that 7th Gothic head only lasted for a short time. And then it was wiped off again, and we went back to the imperial system. But it was a very, very weakened imperial system But Justinian did something else really important. He changed something. You see, now the empire is Christian, there's bishops everywhere, and all of them are ambitious men, and all of them would like to be top dog, but there's really only 2 or 3 who can claim to be top bishop. Bishop of Rome, Bishop of Constantinople, and at a pinch, Bishop of Jerusalem. The rest of them, not a chance. And so they're all fighting it out. Who's going to be the top dog? Who's the head bishop? And the Bishop of Rome has been gradually persuading people, but he cannot persuade the Bishop of Constantinople until along comes Justinian. And this is Justinian's present to the Western Roman Empire. Now, this is from the novels. That doesn't mean they were entertaining pieces of literature written by Justinian. What it was basically a compression of all the laws that Justinian wrote in his long history, and there were thousands of them. But here's a letter he wrote. He said, hence, in accordance with the provisions of these councils, we order that the most holy Pope of ancient Rome shall hold the first rank of all the pontiffs. But the most blessed Archbishop of Constantinople or New Rome shall occupy second place after the Holy Apostolic See of ancient Rome, which will take precedence over all others. So here we go. Here is the dragon system, Western Roman Empire, ruled by the descendants of Constantine, setting up power in the West. The dragon is giving the Western Roman kingdom power because it's saying to the Pope, you are top dog.
It's interesting how it worked out too, because it also is set up so the Western and the East could never rejoin, because the Western would only join the Eastern in the end if the Eastern would agree that the Pope was the
yes
Pope, and they wouldn't, and that kept them apart.
Yes.
Rejoining.
So I think
it's trying to re-establish the empire.
Yes.
To remain split.
Unintended consequence of the way he set it up was that now the two sides are forever divided, and of course that would make no sense. I mean, if they joined, then we'd have an image that kind of had an O leg, wouldn't it? You can't have the legs ever join back together again, otherwise Daniel breaks. Prophecy is tricky like that. So an unintended consequence of the way Justinian set it up is that you've got an emperor now in the East who is very strong, and an emperor in the West who is weak, and a pope in the West who is strong, and a pope in the East who is weak. And that would keep them divided forever after. All right, so this is the granting of power from the dragon to this new Western beast that has crawled up like something horrible out of the sea. Does that make sense? Fundamentally, the real power comes from the emperor in the East saying to the Pope in the West, you have power to be the supreme ecclesiastical authority on the planet. So, dragon can be confusing. Like all of these symbols, it morphs and follows an attitude, a spirit, a way of thinking. It's not locked into one person. And so way back when it was pagan Rome, that was what was dragonish. And then it became pagan Rome under Licinius, specifically in Revelation 13. And then by the end of Revelation 13, it's Constantine. He's the dragonish one. And now we're way beyond Constantine. We're into Justinian and the Byzantine Empire. It's the dragon. And in the future, well, that spirit of antipathy to the saints and to Israel and that dragon-like militaristic empire-building attitude has moved to Russia. And for those of you who've been to Russia, you'll know that the Russian symbol is a supine crescent, a crescent lying on its back with a cross above it, because they're really saying, we will reclaim Constantinople. That's what that flag means. We're going to knock the symbol of Islam over, and we're going to put a cross on top. So, the wound is healed. An emperor is re-established in the West. The Pope is set up. And everyone just goes, oh, wow. The Roman Empire is amazing, isn't it? The whole world is impressed by what Justinian has achieved. They worship the dragon. And the dragon has a re-established authority over the old Roman Empire. And they worship the beast now because, wow, we've got this Pope. Who can make war with him? He's, it's no good trying to, bring in some more Huns and wipe out this empire. It's backed by the dragon. The beast is powerful. And so the beast is given this mouth to speak great things and blasphemies. Now we'll have a look at some of that right down at the end, what some of those things that they spoke. But effectively, this is the power that has now been vested in the Pope to say whatever he likes. You want to get into heaven? Give me some money. I'll get you into heaven. No problem. I've got to deal with the guy up there. You don't like the devil? That's right. I know how to handle him because I am God on earth. And he could say whatever he liked. And power was given unto him to survive, to continue on for 42 months. So, we've done this calculation a number of times. 42 months is what? 42 times 30 days, 1,260 years if you plug it into your calculator. We remember the day for a year calculation. We won't go through it all again. But note what it says in your margin. Verse 5, it's not he's going to continue 42 months. No, he's going to make war 42 months. 42 months. 1,260 years of war. What with? God and the saints. He opened his mouth to blaspheme against God and the saints. Verse 7, it was given to him to make war with the saints, to overcome them. Power was given him by the dragon over all kindreds, tongues, and nations, because now the Pope has got influence not just in the Western Roman Empire, but in the East, at least until the division that would happen later on. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life. So that 42 months, we're not going to go through the time periods in detail tonight, but 1,260 years after any one of a number of important starting points in the establishment of the power of the Catholic system brings you exactly to an important ending point in the power of the Catholic system. Let me say that again to make it clear. 533, Justinian says, Pope, top dog. 1,260 years later, 1793, middle of the French Revolution, the Pope is busy getting pushed out of France. Or 1540, Justinian captures Ravenna. And you might say, well, who cares about Ravenna? Ravenna at that time was the capital of the Western Roman Empire. 1800, 1,260 years later, Napoleon starts invading Italy, which just happened to be where the Pope lived. And every beginning point shows a rising moment for the Orthodox Catholic system in the West. And every ending point, 1,260 years later, shows you a point at which the Roman Catholic system was in terminal decline. And it kind of doesn't matter what starting point you could pick. I've just got 7 or 8 there. I reckon there's probably 20 or 30 if you go hunting. And just to give us that timing, 533, this is the Codex of Justinian. So the one we looked at before was the novella that was written about 537. It was a confirmation of what it had already been said. In this letter, we won't go through it, but Justinian, victorious and pious, writes a letter to John the Patriarch, an archbishop in the fair city of Rome. And in it, he says, I consider you as a father. He goes on to say, I'm making everyone subject to you. And then he says down at the bottom, it's going to be discussed without being brought to the notice of your holiness because you are the head of all the holy churches. 533. The date is right. And 1,260 years later, we're at the apex of the French Revolution and poor old Louis gets his head chopped off on the guillotine. All right, verse 8. All that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. In other words, everyone who's not a believer. We all get that verse. Everyone who's not a believer is going to worship him. Everyone who is, isn't going to worship him. But we read this verse wrong, and I just want to make this point. I know it's a digression, but we read this verse wrong. We read it that everyone whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb, which Lamb was slain at the foundation of the world. And of course, Christ was in a symbol. But that's not what that verse is saying. That verse should be read this way. Now, this is the way the ESV reads it. Lots of other translations don't, but I'm going to prove to you why this is the right way to read it. All who dwell on the earth shall worship the beast, everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the earth, of the world, in the book of the life of the Lamb who was slain. The names are what were written in the book way back then. And that's so much more comforting, because what Christ is saying to all of these believers who are suffering at this point in time, he's saying, don't worry. You feel like they'll be around for 1,000 years? Your name has already been around for 4,000 years in a book in heaven. Here it is. Brother John, here's your name. It's been written there for 4,000 years. Don't you worry about a piddling 1,000 years with this horrible kingdom. Don't worry. That's why this is important. Now, we know this is the way this should be read, because have a look at this. This is Revelation 17 again. And he says, the beast that you saw was and is not. It ascends out of the bottomless pit, out of the abyss. It's the same beast. It goes into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder. Who wonders? Well, everyone whose name is not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world. It's the same passage about the same group of people. And John here is saying, this is the way to read this verse. He's talking about people who've been written by God, who are known by God. And he's saying to the saints, don't worry. Things will get tough, but your name was written in heaven thousands of years ago. If anyone have ears to hear, let him hear that. And he talks then, I think he's probably citing Ephesians chapter 4 and one of the Psalms. I can't remember quite which one, but we can talk about verse 10 over supper. I haven't exactly got that one nailed. So then, John sees another. It's like a lamb. So cute. We've got a lammy beast. Isn't that beautiful, with two little horns? It's a perfect symbol of another empire, a new empire that emerges. Now, what we're seeing here is it's kind of like a morphing, in a sense, that the horrible leopardy beast is morphing into the lamb, but both of them are kind of going to be there simultaneously. John's not seeing one disappear. It's just that the characteristics and the spirit of one just kind of blur into the next as well, and they almost pour each other into each other. But this empire is going to be a little bit different because, well, it's like a lamb. It's like Christ. This is a truly new type of empire. It's all soft and cuddly. Except, of course, we know that it's not. It's not at all soft and cuddly, but it is branding itself very clearly as ecclesiastical from the very beginning. Unlike the empire of the sea, the beast of the sea, which was founded on Roman imperialism, this one is first founded on Christianity and then imperialism. And we're going to see that even though it looks like a lamb, it talks like a dragon. What does that mean? Well, the dragon said, until you offer to my idols, you cannot get water. Yeah, die of thirst. See what I care. It speaks like a dragon, and this lamb will speak the same way. We'll talk about the history of this in a minute, but I just want to talk first about lamb horns. Now, chessboard. You've all seen a chessboard before. I don't know if you've ever looked at the bishop before. You'll notice how the bishop's kind of got two horns, right? There's a similarity there. I actually think it's probably intentional. There is this kind of two horns on a bishop's hat. And maybe the spirit is pointing us in a particular direction. Maybe not. Maybe they are. But certainly what we're being told about here is that this is going to be a kingdom that has got two sources of power. This lammy kingdom will have two sources of power. And this picture here depicts those two sources of power. So this is from, I think, the Lateran Church in Rome. It's a mosaic installed, I think, by Pope Leo. Pope Leo was the one who crowned Charlemagne. And we'll talk more about that in a second. But the point of what this image shows is that it's not Leo, that's Peter sitting up on a throne, Saint Peter. And he is going to simultaneously give power. On one side to Charlemagne, he's giving him a spear. And on the other side to Leo, Pope Leo, he's giving him the belt of being, the popey belt. Because, if you're going to be a pope, you have to have a great belt. And so this is depicting Peter in one stroke giving power to both ecclesiastical and political parts of the empire. This is your two horns. Two horns. And it happened with the crowning of Charlemagne. So what happened was this. About 770, 780, the popes were having a really bad time. Yeah, the empire in the West had sort of limped along, but when Justinian got off the scene, they didn't have as much military backing, and it got harder and harder and harder, and taxation didn't work, and everyone kind of got nasty, and eventually even the people of Rome got hacked off with the Pope, so much so that Leo had to run away from Rome because, and this is what he complained to Charlemagne, people were trying to steal his eyeballs and his tongue. He was a bit threatened by that, so he ran off to France, saw Charlemagne. The reason he went to see Charlemagne is because Charlemagne and his dad's dad had helped the popes for a very long time. Whenever they got a scrape, they'd ring up one of this family, the Carolingian family, and they'd say, "We've got a problem, can you come and give us a hand?" And they would. They were very, very faithful people, faithful in the Catholic sense. And so on this particular occasion, Charlemagne said, "No worries, I'll come and help you out." So he raced back down to Rome, but there with a big army, convenes a synod of all the bishops, makes sure the Roman people can see him, reestablishes Leo. Everyone goes, "Yep, we're not going to steal his tongue and eyeballs anymore. He is the Pope." But the next day, what the Pope decides to do is crown Charlemagne. But the thing is, Charlemagne's already crowned. He's king. He doesn't have a problem with this. It's Christmas Day, 25th of December, 799, and Charlemagne apparently had no idea what was going on. It's sort of a, "Hey, just pop into this church for a minute, will you? And I'll crown you." What? We're told this. He at first had such an aversion that he declared he would have not set foot in the church that day that they had where the imperial titles were confirmed, although it was a great feast day, if he could have foreseen the design of the Pope. If he knew what the Pope was up to, he'd have never put up with it. But he got crowned. The Pope crowned him. I particularly like this picture of the Pope being crowned. There's a couple of reasons. You have to look at it quite closely. But it is kind of funny. I'm pretty sure that is the evil fairy from Cinderella, and I think that might be Cinderella who's just pricked her finger or eaten an apple. I'm pretty sure that's... I don't know what this guy is doing. I think he was trying to take a selfie and just timed it wrong. But if you look at this picture, the more you look at this picture, the more you get convinced there's something really weird going on. And there is, because Pope Leo is crowning the guy who's already crowned. And this was a very, very clever move by the Pope. Because what the Pope then did is he said, "I'm crowning you." He said, "Oh, well, I've already got a crown." No, it's a different crown. "I'm crowning you as Emperor of the Romans." Now, what Leo was trying to do was tie this guy with a big army to him forever after. So that whenever he needed someone, that's my guy. He's my emperor. So I just call him down when I need some help. But he also achieved another thing, because he now made it so that whoever was going to take over from Charlemagne would get crowned by the Pope. The Pope is the guy who crowns you. But also, it's a symbiotic relationship, because you see, the popes can't survive without this guy they crown. So they're kind of crowning each other. And he built, the Pope Leo, unconsciously and accidentally built something that meant there was this crossover, these two horns of power that needed each other to stay alive. Now, Charlemagne, yeah, Chris.
And when he comes to Napoleon, he wanted the Pope to crown him. And the Pope went to do it. He took the crown himself and crowned himself sort of breaking.
That's right. Napoleon broke that tradition, and I bet you if we looked at the timeline, it would be close to 1,260 years later. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. So what Charles then did is, Charlemagne, Charles we'll call him, he realized he had this title of Emperor of the Romans. And so it just so happened, in wisdom of God, that he was going to build an empire. He was quite successful. He went out and fought 33 campaigns under the banner of Christ and won just about all of them, and grew and grew and grew his kingdom. We saw that here, to the point he's basically got all of France, all of Belgium, most of Italy, and a bit of Spain. And this is the beginning of the beast of the earth, or the Holy Roman Empire. It won't get the name of Holy Roman Empire till about another 300 years on down the track, but nonetheless, he is still recognized as Emperor of the Romans. And he got that. So what he started doing was he started drawing a link, Charlemagne, between his empire and ancient Rome, deliberately changing laws, altering the styling of buildings, changing the languages that were used in church services, altering political ceremonies and the like to make them Roman. He understood, and he was drawing a link with ancient Rome. And in many ways, this meant modernizing, because sadly, ancient Rome was more advanced than his kingdom. Here's one example of it. This is Charlemagne's church, his favorite chapel. He built this. It was consecrated by Pope Leo in 805. The bit I want you to look at is the middle bit, that domey bit. Because if that looks kind of Turkish to you, you're right. That's actually modeled on the Hagia Sophia in Constantinople, the other Rome. He was modeling it on a Roman building. That's the floor plan of it. And he called it the Palatine Chapel. And you might think, Palatine. Where have I heard that? And some of you will be thinking Star Wars, and you're wrong. The rest of you will be thinking the Palatine Hill in the middle of Rome. That's what he called it. He started connecting everything with Rome. Why? Well, because that's what this is. It's just an evolution of the old system. And so the Holy Roman Empire started with Charlemagne. Now, we're going to race through this because we're really short of time. In fact, I'm over time already. My apologies, everybody. The Pope has a problem, though. And his problem is this. Charlemagne and the emperors have got power, they've got soldiers, they've got weapons, all that sort of stuff. He's just got the ability to write nasty letters. Dear Sir, was speaking to the angel Gabriel the other day. He's annoyed with you. Fix this up or we'll get hacked off and fire will rain down from the sky. That's the sort of thing he could come up with. And that's pretty much the best he had for a very, very long time. But back in Daniel, you'll remember there were 3 horns torn out in front of one horn that came up speaking great things. Well, that's kind of what Charlemagne did, because when Charlemagne came through, he wiped out the Lombards, and in so doing, he wiped out 3 small Italian kingdoms, and he gave them to the Pope. And all of a sudden, the Pope's now got land, and he can levy soldiers from that land, and he can get tax. And now the Pope, all of a sudden, he stops being a guy who just has churches, and he's actually a king now. A king in his own right, a horn, if you like. Machiavelli, famous for writing The Prince, said in his book, The Florentine History, but effectively in the middle of it, he says that the Pope and the people of Rome made Charlemagne emperor, and thus Rome began to have an emperor of the West. Whereas the popes used to be established by the emperors, the latter now began to have need of the popes at their elections. The empire continued to lose power, but so on. The church constantly extended her authority over temporal princes. Machiavelli saying, look, this whole thing with Leo and Charlemagne is where the Pope got power in the physical world, with swords and with guns and those sorts of things. Voltaire says exactly the same thing. We don't have time to look at it, but he's effectively saying, where did the Pope get land, soldiers, taxes, instead of just Bibles? He got it from this incident with Charlemagne. And so now things have changed, because you see, remember, verse 14, this system makes an image of the beast. So the lamb system is going to construct a copy of the beast of the sea. Well, what's happened here? Well, when Charlemagne gave the Pope land, even though he made Charlemagne emperor, the Pope becomes a mini emperor in his own right. And in a sense, he became the co-emperor, but he became a copy of the old beast of the sea with powers and strength of his own to do his own thing. And this copy has got powers, and this lamb gives life unto this image of the beast, in other words, to the papal system. So now the image of the beast can speak. Now, we're almost finished for those of you who are worrying. What did this lamb and this copy of the image of the beast of the sea do? Well, together, verse 15, they cause as many as it would not worship the image of the beast, the Pope, to be killed. They caused all, both small and free, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hands and their foreheads, that no man can buy or sell, save that he have the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom 666. And of course, everyone loves this bit. What is this about? Well, under Roman law, if you had a slave, you were entitled to mark them. This is from Plutarch, writing about 8100 or so, and he says that particular battle, they got a whole bunch of slaves, they were Athenian slaves, they branded them in the forehead with the mark of a horse. Why mark of horse, I don't know. Other stories tell how what they would do is a slave owner would brand in the forehead of their servants the letters FGR for fugitive, so that if anyone found them, they'd go, what's written in? Oh, fugitive. Another story tells of slaves being branded with the text, I have run away. Here's another one. This is from a novel, but it's a novel based on Roman life, again from about the year 66 AD, so around the time of Christ. Deceived by our parents, Tryphena wept bitterly, believing that the marks upon our foreheads were in truth the brands of prisoners. It was a common thing. Showed up in novels and stories and movies at the time. When you got branded in the forehead or branded in the hand, it meant you were owned. And that's the point of 666. It's about ownership. The Pope owned people, mind, body, and soul in every sense. And unless you were owned by the Pope, you couldn't do anything. And here's a weird thing. Brother Thomas has a big section in which he quotes a whole lot of old writings in which the church describes how you can't buy or sell unless you're Catholic. He took that, plagiarized that from an earlier writing, which took it from an earlier writing, which took it from an earlier writing. I actually found a French writing in about 1701, which is almost word for word the same as Brother Thomas. Here's the issue. You can't find any of the original writings, or at least I couldn't. I reckon the church has edited them out, so you can't find them. They've got all of their encyclicals, but those particular words in which the quotations say things like, you could not buy or sell unless you were Catholic, or a heretic, you could not buy or sell, they've been edited out. I couldn't find them. And trust me, I looked for hours. I thought that was kind of interesting. And so the image of the beast is given power to speak. How did it speak? Well, I was very tempted to write something different on the screen, change one letter, because the church released papal edicts or papal bulls, and they covered all manner of things, and they had power to speak and to tell people how to live their lives. Now, just in case you're wondering, did they write one every now and again? Here you go. Here's some of the papal bulls, not all of them. Hurry up, Uncle Bill. Hurry up. Power to speak and speak and speak and speak and speak and speak. And if you go through these, a lot of them are, the Jews are not to live in our land. You must get rid of Jews. Make the Jews wear strange t-shirts. If you're a heretic, you can't buy or sell. These are the labels of them. You can't see what's in them, of course. That's what I was saying. But you can tell from the labels of kind of what they're going on about. The Waldenses are heretics, and campaign against the Waldenses and all these sorts of things. Thousands and thousands of writing, because they're killing those who will not worship the beast, and everybody else can't buy or sell unless you have the mark that makes you owned. and the mark, 666. Now, most of you will have seen this, but some of you won't. So in Latin, there are 6 numbers. In Old Latin. In New Latin, there's one more. But in Old Latin, there were 6 numbers, 1, 5, 10, 50, 100, and 500. If you take Vicar of the Son of God, Vicarus Filii Dei, which is the title of the Pope, which means the one substituted in the place of the Son of God, and you add up the letters that represent numbers, you get 666. Does the kind of math make sense to everybody, how that works? Charlie, does that kind of make sense? Yep, good. That's the right answer. Excellent. Captain of the clergy, if you add up all of the letters that have numerical equivalents, in other words, Dux, Clari, captain of the clergy, a title of the Pope, it makes 666. Vicar of the court, another title of the Pope, 666. In Latin, there's a whole stack of titles of the Pope that when you take the letters that have numerical equivalents in Latin, they make 666. And legend has it, I haven't been able to verify this, that at one point the Pope was trying to make himself a crown. He wrote, I think it was captain of the clergy on the hat. Someone said to him, did you realize that adds up to 666? So he changed it, and I think he changed it to Vicar of the Son of God, and it still added up to 666. I haven't been able to prove that. But here's the amazing thing. It works in Greek as well. So Greek has got a whole different numbering system. But when you look at the Greek numbering system, the Latin kingdom is 666. The Latin-speaking man, 666. The Italian church, 666. And this one's interesting, apostate, 666. Now, I always used to look at this one and go, hey, that doesn't work because there's a letter there that's got this ST. That should be 2 letters, not 1. They're cheating. But they're not, because in the word 666 there, that's not written the way any other 666 is written in the Bible, or actually any other 6 in the Bible. In the Greek, in verse 18, it's chi, xi, stigma. And you look up the letter or word stigma, only place in the Bible it shows up. It's an ancient Greek letter or character that was dropped by the time of Christ. But he puts it in. And here is that same ancient character. It's the ST character. And it used to represent 6. We know it's correct because Christ has used it here. Apostates make 666. But the weird thing is stigma just happens to be in Mark. It's the number marked in Scripture. Marked to say that they are in the mark of the beast. Now, I just want to read you one final thing and then we'll finish up. I know I'm way over time, my apologies. It says here that the lamb and also the image of the beast will do wonders and they will lie and they will deceive and do miracles. Now, what was it they did? Well, they won wars and they set up an empire and they did some amazing things. But I'm going to read you from a book I've got, a book I used to have till someone borrowed it, called The Black Prophet. It's an illegal book, according to the Catholics. Rome's appeal is to the ignorance of her benighted followers. Who but the ignorant and superstitious could consider her claims? Take her relics as an illustration. In Rome is said to be found the heads of St. Paul and St. Peter, a lock of the Virgin Mary's hair, Aaron's rod that budded, the stone on which the rooster stood when he crowed at the denial of Peter, the staff of Moses with some drops of Christ's blood in a bottle. They claim to have the finger of St. Anne, the mother of Mary, in Rome, and the arm of Lazarus. They have the head of St. Denis there, which he carried some miles after it had been cut off. In France, they have 4 heads of John the Baptist. There are 8 arms of St. Matthew scattered across the Catholic Church. The entire head of St. Peter is found in Rome, but the monks at Bilbao also have a large part of Peter's head. This extra half is no difficulty whatever to priests. They also boast the shoulder blade and leg bone of Mary Magdalene, as well as the tail of Balaam's ass. There are 5 legs of the colt upon which Christ rode into Jerusalem to be found in the Catholic Church. They claim to have some of the flowers of Aaron's rod, some of the manna that fell in the wilderness. They have the ark which Moses made. They have the very stones the devil tempted the Lord to turn into bread, the dice the soldiers threw for his coat. They have St. Joseph's axe and saw, the millstone in which St. Andrew famously crossed the sea. They have St. Joseph's breeches, St. Mark's boots, the Virgin's green petticoat, and they have St. Anthony's nails and the parings of St. Edmund's toes. They have the bottle of St. Joseph's breath, taken while he was using the axe. They possess several bottles of the Virgin's milk and a small roll of butter and a bit of cheese made for it. They have part of the finger of the Holy Ghost, some of the rope that Judas used to hang himself, the nose of an angel, some rays of the star which led the wise men, a wing of Gabriel obtained by the prayers of Pope Gregory VII, the beard of Noah, and last but hardly least, they have one of the steps of Jacob's ladder. There's miracles for you, all courtesy of both the beast of the sea, the beast of the earth, and the image. Thanks for being patient.
All right, thanks, Dan, for taking us on the journey of the history found in Revelation 13. And I guess all the twists and turns of how these prophecies came to pass as well. So very interesting. I only have one announcement, which is for next week, the business meeting on November the 11th, which is the business meeting about the Constitution change. And it looks like a twilight fair. Can't read the small writing, but I'm guessing it's, oh, is it here, is it? Yeah, but it's Heritage, right? Yeah. So, yeah. So Saturday at Heritage College, the Twilight Fair. Okay, we will now close with hymn 415 and prayer. Kingdom soon come to stand forever, because it is at this time that all people will praise and worship you. But we stand now before you humbled, knowing that all things are in your hand, and we have seen that you're in control of the empires of the earth and all people and all rulers, including the empires that we have around us today. And considering these things, it has given us confidence in your hope, Father, because we know that you will bring about your plan and your purpose. And we pray for your guidance that we may have our names in the book of life. So we thank you for this plan and for the opportunity to be a part of it, and for all that you do to help us towards this time. And we thank you for all blessings that you provide to us each day to give us strength in our walk towards this kingdom. And we come to you now through our future King, the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.